never-ending rutted road, 2,000 kilometers from Moscow in the middle of the Ural Mountains. Camp Perm 35, the last Gulag. This is the most secret of secret prisons in the world, where the USSR's last political prisoners are held. The shock of seeing the first shots ever of the area, the camp where the communists used to send those who were against the regime. Perm 389-35, a sinister number for human rights. Perm 35. This is where Nathan Sharansky, among others, spent many years of his life with the offensive having an opinion before being traded by the Soviet spy Colonel Abel in Berlin in 1986. Tuesday, July 18th, 5:30 a.m. On the other side of the world, in a small clearing in the taiga forest, a barbed wire universe of watchtowers, police dogs, and nervous young soldiers armed to the teeth. The Arctic Circle is nearby. At this time of year, it's never dark. In winter, it's never light. Nicholas Osin, head of the penal colony, and his officers, who did everything in their power to postpone our visit to the last, were waiting for us in front of the administration building set up outside the camp. "6 p.m. on the dot, a historic moment. Lieutenant Colonel Osin opens the steel-plated doors and iron bars of the safety lock leading into Perm 35. For the first time, a Western movie camera films a camp for political prisoners in the USSR. The result of 2 years of negotiations with the highest Soviet authorities before Glasnost finally gave access to one of the most mysterious and disturbing places in the world. The previous evening, we had a very tough conversation in Lieutenant Colonel Osin's office to get permission to film non-stop a day in the prisoners' lives from the time they woke up until they went to sleep, in order to be able to talk with them freely where they were, and with the assurance that all doors would be open to us without a single exception. The administration, on the other hand, refused to tell the prisoners beforehand that we were coming for the security reasons we were told. When we entered the dormitories, the prisoners were still asleep. Nobody believed us when we said we were French reporters. Westerners here? It was as if God had fallen from the sky, in Sharansky's own words, when he heard that we had been able to get into his camp. Thanks to Amnesty International and to various Soviet dissident organizations, we knew the names of the 22 political prisoners incarcerated at Perm 35, but not their faces. By questioning the guards who never left our side, we tried to identify them. This was far from easy, as they were with a group of 5 spies and above all 11 war criminals in shocking promiscuity. We succeed in putting a name on a face. Alexis Shcherbakov. He was the first to have expressed his disbelief at our being Western reporters. Sentenced in 1986 to 15 years in a camp plus 5 years of internal exile, Article 64, treason to the motherland for having hijacked a plane. A second prisoner draws the camera's eye by his stare, all the while shaving endlessly. Bogdan Klimchak. Condemned for treason and anti-Soviet propaganda to 15 years in a camp and 5 years of internal exile, illegal crossing of border between the USSR and Iran. This anti-communist Ukrainian nationalist has spent all of his life in different camps. Amnesty International is demanding his immediate release. The Zeks who have received packages are allowed to have their breakfast near the dormitory. This would be unbelievable in a common law camp. The tall one is Arenberg. Sentenced to 13 years of camp, prison term shortened by 3 years, hijacking a plane to go to Israel. This Leningrad Jew was married in prison in 1986 and has a little girl who lives with her mother in Kharkov, Ukraine. Little by little, we became part of camp life, just like the barbed wire and guards. Viktor Makarov, condemned 13 years in camp for treason, Article 64, sentenced for espionage. It's incredible. It's a dream. Furtive glances at the visitors and cryptic remarks. Real reporters? Or simply a new KGB provocation well known to Alexander Udachin. Sentenced to 10 years in camp, anti-Soviet propaganda, treason, desertion, tried to escape to East Berlin, term shortened by 3 years. Another prisoner recites verses from the Bible while his neighbor makes his own bed. He's an Orthodox priest, Father Tichenkov, an archimandrist priest of the dissident Russian Orthodox Tikhonist Church, condemned for treason, condemned for having communicated economic and military information abroad, of Russian noble descent. Nobody speaks to anybody. In front of the dormitory, among those waiting for the canteen to open, the same dead silence. It's my name, you see. The first to break the collective silence is Viktor Makarov.
Accumulation of dignity. Of dignity, of course. Because dignity is the main in the main which characterize the strength of the person. Because when there is no dignity, there is no strength. And that's why they try to do that. There will be no dignity inside us.
You see our
They're asking you if anyone among us knew that the French television team was coming over. No, we didn't know it, but we guessed. At least, we supposed.
Foreign television came.
Because of what you suppose?
How did you guess it?
По ремонту срочному.
By the repair.
Занавескам на окна.
Because of all those unexpected repairs. Because of the curtains, the tablecloth.
And because of the food too?
And also because of the food? No. Nothing has changed. The food is like it was, as bad as usual. In order to obtain a sensible decision, here you have to appeal to the director of the camp. It is only through him, and through him alone, that one can obtain anything. But excuse me, I have to go. I'm a rock musician. My name is Ivanov. In the canteen, where those who could not dig into their reserves go, the same solitude. Life here seems to move in slow motion, a little like a psychiatric hospital. Not a word, not a glance. Nothing like a common law military camp. Suddenly, someone starts insulting us. Leonid Lubman. You bastards. You're not filming what you should be filming. I'm going to show you what really goes on here. What is lacking here is America. We'd like to be treated like human beings. Condemned to 15 years for treason. Tried to send out to the West a 600-page report on the USSR. This Leningrad Jew had been in the Lefortovo and Chistopol camps for political prisoners before landing here. In the 70s, the Perm 35 camp had up to 270 people. Last December, there were only 62 prisoners. Today, there are only half as many. Officially, only 4 of them can be considered as real political prisoners. They had been condemned according to the notorious Article 70 of the Russian Penal Code, which repressed anti-Soviet and anti-socialist activities until last year. Today, there are 4 convicts by virtue of Article 70, but who are also condemned by virtue of Article 64. What are their names? He says that there are 4 to whom one can apply Article 70. Klimchak, Goldovich, Mikhailov, and Udachin.
I want life in
I wanted
United Kingdom.
to live in the United Kingdom.
And you don't ask for a visa?
You didn't ask for a visa?
I'm not gonna ask for a visa.
Who can ask for a visa? It's nonsense in the USSR.
But now there is sense.
No,
But now there is sense.
this is real.
No,
But
today this is real. But 8 or 3 years ago it was nonsense. In fact, about 20 other prisoners can be found here who had tried to get out of the country illegally. Such is the case of Vadim Arenberg, who hijacked a plane in order to emigrate to Israel and who only recently could have his own personal Bible. My brother and I wanted to go and live in Israel. Our second goal was liberating Sharansky and Ginsburg, Slibika and Orlov. We wanted to take hostages and exchange them against the prisoners. Sharansky was liberated before you?
Да. И Гинзбург тоже. Все
Yes, and Ginsburg too.
Мне дали 13 лет, но по амнистии 2 года.
I was sentenced to 13 years in prison with a reduction of 2 years.
Vous avez envie de repartir en
Are you
Israël?
going to continue to ask to leave for Israel?
Сейчас
Oh, that's a very difficult question.
изменилось в этой стране. Ну так, судя по
There are a great many changes taking place in the country. On television, in the press,
потому хотя бы, что вы здесь, и что был здесь Розенталь.
especially I learned from my wife's letters.
Так что я сейчас однозначно не могу ответить на этот вопрос.
For the moment, I can't give you a definite answer.
У меня жена, дочь.
I have a wife, a daughter.
Надо посмотреть, как.
I want to see what liberty is like now. Get out of the USSR at any price. The same thing put Sergei Fedotkin behind barbed wire for 6 years.
Я сижу 3 года.
Да.
For how long have you been here? 3 years. Yes, 3 years. And I have 3 more years to serve. Why?
Так, почему?
Потому что
Because
слонов
I wanted to go and see the elephants in Africa.
хотел полетать.
I wanted to take a plane
С
trip.
детства мечта, понимаете, слона.
It's my dream, stroking the ears of an elephant.
Ну, я хотел слетать в Африку.
I wanted to leave for Africa, but I wasn't allowed to go.
Посадили.
They put me in
Ничего,
prison.
я слетаю.
But no matter, I'll go.
3 года провел.
Sherbakov and his wife also hijacked a plane, but with much stronger political motives.
My name is Alexei Sherbakov.
And why are you a prisoner?
I am prisoner between I want to be free. I and my wife, which is in Moscow now, we wanted to be free. We didn't see another way to left USSR, to left that anti-humanistic state. We have no another way for it than to be as how I say it, by plane.
Now I question in English, and when you answer me, you answer me in Russian, and I will translate after, okay? I think that the best solution for you, okay?
But translators will be your translators, not that.
Yes, yes.
See, ну, я могу сказать по этому поводу, что вот мое заключение
I can
здесь,
tell you that I do not consider my imprisonment here to be legal, because according to the Declaration of Human Rights, one should have the possibility of moving about freely, of choosing one's residence, and finally of asking for political asylum. But the fact of asking for political asylum always seems to be linked to illegal action.
Поэтому свои действия, а у меня, кстати,
That is why I insist upon saying that I possess no weapon, and what I did was no different from crossing a border, because you know that here there are no other solutions. Asking to renounce one's Soviet citizenship is the same as heading straight for a psychiatric asylum.
Yeah. Forced labor.
7:50 a.m. The guard Volkov, nicknamed the Butcher by the inmates, morning roll call.
Дачин. Андерсон. Прокопов. Макаров. Лубман. Павлов. Гавриш. Рассказов. Нуркаев. Филатов. Я. Остапенко. Я. Щебаль. Я. Майборода. Я. Старенко. Я. Айренберг. Я. Попов. Здесь. Вельчак. Я. Разговоры. Стейбли. Я. Звонок. Директор.
Everyone is searched before leaving for the factory inside the camp. Eight hours work, 6 days a week for 250 rubles. Ordinary pay in the USSR, but half of it is withheld for room and board. Productivity bonuses are paid in cash or in time off the sentences. Refusal to work is paid in punishments, which can go as far as being sent into solitary confinement. On the ground floor is the metallurgy workshop. That is where we met the diplomat Anatol Filatov, stationed in Algiers in 1976. Sentenced to death for spying for the CIA, commuted to 15 years in a camp plus 5 years of internal exile. Filatov speaks impeccable French. Is the camp regime less hard than in prison? That depends upon the personality of the individual and whether you're conscious of having been condemned for a genuine reason or not. And do you think that you were sentenced for a real reason? Yes, I deserve this punishment. In other words, there is a certain difference between certain prisoners and the others. Yes, each one caters to his own interests. But in my case, everything depends on the work. When I work, the days pass very quickly. The others prefer to do something else, not to work. That depends upon the individual. For me, the essential thing is work. What is it that helps you stand being locked up? Oh, the hope of getting out of here. Yes, the hope of getting out. And then I left 2 children behind. When I was arrested, my son was 12 years old and my daughter 8. And so I worked desperately hard to help them live. Do you read? Oh yes, always. 4 to 6 hours per day. There is nothing but reading to help you stand all of this. The war criminals, after having been capos for the Nazis, continue doing the same thing in camp in return for which they get special treatment. They work the vegetable garden and raise rabbits, the produce of both being reserved for the camp personnel. In another part of camp, other prisoners are busy sewing. Father Tichenkov is head sackcloth cutter. 10 years of detention have not succeeded in breaking his determination to pick up where he left off and continue what sent him to Perm 35 in the first place as soon as he set free. We tried to save the national treasures of Russia, which are squandered abroad, to prevent those icons which are now crossing the borders of our country from being sold abroad, and saving what remains of the Russian intelligentsia. 90% of our priests are in prison today. We've transgressed Soviet laws to develop our church. We've transmitted all our information, whether military, economic, or political. The Soviet state accuses us of counting in our midst former kulaks, plutocrats, former nobles, but there's a tendency to forget that they have children. We want to prevent their children from being victims of repression. They must be full-fledged citizens of our country, beloved of God. We defend our patriotic position. He who outrages his homeland is a criminal. The priest also spoke to us about conflicts between inmates which are caused by their intellectual differences. On the other hand, he refused to say anything whatsoever about homosexuality in the camp. Only Viktor Makarov dared approach the subject.
In every prison in the world, KGB has tried there were such relations. There were some gays, several gays here, and KGB. They were almost all of these were KGB agents, but KGB tried to use this circumstance and to shame some people, because KGB used this method reactively.
Shortly before midday, the musician Maxim Ivanov in turn evoked the very difficult moral conditions in which the prisoners of opinion lived, and how he resisted his jailers. What I would like to say concerning the future is that I wish to leave this country. I'm a rock musician, independently of all that is happening, of the difficult, unbearable conditions. I'm not speaking of food, which is finally not essential, but of spiritual food. Do you understand? He who arrives here suffers first of all morally, you understand? It's difficult to compose behind barbed wire, to write songs. I try to do it all the same. I continue to work, and I hope very much that my songs will be heard. Everybody has written a great deal about the camps, but no one has yet heard the sound of the barbed wire. I will perhaps be the first to try to restore this sound. I believe in this. Midday, everybody goes to the canteen, after having gone through the series of iron-barred doors which are all over to prevent the prisoners from moving about freely from one sector of the camp to another. This is not spiritual nourishment, split pea mash and thin borscht, no enthusiasm.
Can't eat this food.
A normal man can't eat this food. You have to be awfully hungry to swallow it. It's a sort of mixture with the addition of smelly grease, not to mention the bad quality of the product, spoiled meat that not even a cat would eat. The cabbage is so bitter that it damages your stomach. It's rotten, and so is the other food.
The bad food. Very bad. Very bad.
Leonid Lubman is the first to protest. The other inmates look out of the corner of their eye to see the guards' reactions, guards who pretend to hear and see nothing. Cherbakov continues protesting. The war criminals bend closer to their bowls. 4 inmates give Lubman their very visible support. Several years ago, such an incident would have brought their instigators automatic punishment, which could have gone as far as solitary confinement.
Непрерывно подвергаюсь наказаниям. 2 года я провел в
I'm
карцере.
always being punished.
1 год в полукарцере.
I spent 2 years in a disciplinary cell, 1 year and 9 months to be exact. In semi-solitary confinement, the special cell as they call it, I was deprived of the right to buy food in the store. I was deprived of visits for a period of 5 years. I am the object of constant pressure by instigators. I undergo psychological torture.
В этой зоне имеют место непрерывные пытки.
Because in this zone, torture by means of ultra or infrasounds is a permanent practice. I'd like to say a few words about those tortures, which are a regular practice here, but which they seek by all means to hide. Maintain mental balance while being constantly subjected to subtle psychological pressure, which plays not only upon your weaknesses, but turn your strength against you as well. It's no easy thing, above all when they lure you with early release, if you collaborate and if you confess to imaginary acts of treason. In order to resist, certain prisoners pit their faith against KGB rationalism. I've been here for a long time, since 1979, as I already said. I've had all sorts of problems with the administration. I was forbidden to wear a skull cap inside the zone of the huts. When I was in Zone 36, we wanted to be with Sharansky in order to speak Hebrew, a language he knows, as I do. We were not put together in spite of a hunger strike. In the zone of the huts, I set up a school, a course in Hebrew. There were 5 other people with me, 5 Jews. We were dispersed. One man was sent to prison, and I was placed in solitary confinement for a month in an ice-cold cell. Hunger strikes are the last recourse prisoners have against arbitrary punishment. Have there been any this year in Perm 35? I don't think there was even one this year. No, I don't think so, not even for a day or two. Are there special cells inside the camp? No, I don't think so. It's hard to remember. No. No special cells inside the camp. Yes? Wait. I think somebody did go on hunger strike. Yes, Mamedov. He went on hunger strike. Very embarrassed, Valentina Mikhailova, the camp doctor, confirms the information. She accepts to force-feed prisoners. Sharansky comments, the doctor's competence is not being questioned, nor the equipment at her disposal, but her submission to KGB orders constantly flouts medical morals. In this penal colony with a special regime under apparently rustic conditions, a highly sophisticated surveillance system prevents escape. 1 p.m., another roll call, another search before going back to the grind. Udachin and Sherbakov insist very strongly that we return to see them at work. Lieutenant Colonel Osin kept his promise. We were allowed to go back to the factory. I'm not here by mere chance. In fact, I should have been here from the time when I was 6 or 7 years old. It's simple, I couldn't have known another destiny. My father, who was a KGB official, stayed in Great Britain in 1971, and he's still there. As far as I know, he collaborates with the English secret services. He works with them. From that moment on, my family and I have been under the close surveillance of the KGB. I knew very well that I couldn't have a career, that I couldn't hope to enter the institute or the university of my choice. All that was forbidden. The only thing that I understood from the very beginning was that I shouldn't live in this country, nor should my children, because I know, having had the experience, what it means here to be the son of someone who was a traitor to his country. Look at how they shave me. Look at how they cut my flesh. Look how I'm dressed. Look at what they give us to eat. I have the right to write only 2 letters. You can go ask my doctors for the detail. My file contains a note concerning the wounds which were inflicted on me by the handcuffs. They deliberately broke my wrists here on the 29th of March. Here, one day is worse than the next day. There are no best days among my prison days.
There are no the best days in my prison days. You see?
Since the beginning of the day, criticism has been very sharp. However, that heard on Soviet TV today and in Parliament are no less so. So why keep those who open their mouths too soon in prison? The speeches by the members of Parliament are made to aid Soviet power, whereas those whom you've known here were, as a general rule, fierce opponents of Soviet power. There you have a fundamental difference. What effect does it have when you see that former inmates are becoming officials involved in political life? It's possible that they use the perestroika for their own business. You know, there is a beautiful Russian proverb that says, "The serpent slews off its skin, but its nature remains unchanged."
The skin, not nature.
The workday draws to an end. Bogdan Klimchak piles scrap iron. He will have spent nearly his entire life in the camps. Anti-communist he was, anti-communist he remains, fiercer than ever. But he does not want to leave his country. He dreams of devoting his newfound freedom to the defense of the Ukrainian language. And in order to do it, he demands the right to move around all Europe freely. For the time being, he's wearing himself out with work and is the last to go and wash up.
That's right. That's our life. Hard, tough, but our life. That's it.
И как раз на встрече с доктором Розенталем я
When I spoke previously, I stressed the fact that the essential change which made life easier was the end of torture by hunger. I insist upon the word torture. It was not simply not satisfying one's hunger, the bad quality of the food, but really hunger as torture. That is the principal change. Before, only 7 rubles per month were dedicated to the nourishment of a prisoner in the schizo camp. I, who have always suffered from hunger, even today, cannot prevent myself from keeping a piece of bread with me at all times, out of fear of lacking food. The schizo, the hole, solitary confinement. I've spent a total of 360 days in the schizo section during the 11 years I've been here. I don't count imprisonment in the other camps. A tiny room, a wooden board raised during the day is the only bedding. Until this year, there was no daylight, hot food every other day, and freezing temperatures in the winter. I call upon international public opinion to act so that the Soviet regime can no longer systematically violate the rules. I ask for, 1, the right to write and keep my correspondence. 2, the right to receive books and Soviet magazines. 3, the cessation of torture by cold in the schizo, that is to say, respecting a minimum temperature, the right to wear warm undergarments and outer garments. 4, the right to receive visits which are not limited to members of the family, but which include friends. And 5, the right to write and receive an unlimited number of letters. In the schizo, Klimchak could have added work is mandatory in a cell equipped with sewing machines, hard labor. All doors will be opened, Osin had promised. Behind this spy hole is the infirmary, and in the same building a special cell, the disciplinary cell. Rotting here since the month of April are 3 prisoners, Oleg Mikhailov, Alexander Goldovich, and Ruslan Ketenchev. A 4th inmate, Misha Kazachov, a 55-year-old Leningrad physicist condemned to 18.5 years of imprisonment and who had shared their fate and been sent to the Perm town prison just before our arrival. Straighten things up a bit in this cell. Mikhail, Goldovich, and Ketenchev are here because they demanded to be treated as real political prisoners. They had torn off their names sewn on their clothes, refused to have their heads shaven, and refused mandatory work. Well there. Tell them that later they're going to speak with them. Who is it? They come from France. They're very displeased to be filmed. It's cinema. Is there any one of you who speaks Russian? All that's make-believe. Not very long ago, we were all in a completely different place. We have only been here for a week. We were in the schizo camp. Please excuse us, things are not completely like they usually are. It was a cell with a special regime. Excuse me, you speak French, you understand. Forget it, it's plain that you understand as much as I do. We speak a little bit of Russian. And him, is he Russian, Soviet? No, he's French. Ah, you're French, terrific. We've had so much experience with double dealing. Why have we been transferred here? After Rosenthal, we were waiting for Soviet journalists, but there it is, no one decided to come. It's really great that you were allowed to come here. But you're going to speak with us? Of course. Wait, you. I've known you for 8 years. I don't need to speak with you. I'm perfectly aware of your business. I'm not speaking to you, so shut up, that's all. Mikhailov, calm down. But I am calm. I am calm. It's impossible to speak calmly with you. Calm down. We're going to come in. We're going to discuss things with you. Alexander Goldovich, judged on December the 2nd, 1985, condemned to 15 years in a camp plus 5 years of internal exile for treason toward the motherland, desertion, and anti-Soviet propaganda. Oleg Mikhailov, condemned in 1980 to 13 years. Ruslan Ketenchev, sentenced in 1984 to 10 years.
You're surprised to see them? Are you surprised?
Very surprised. Very surprised.
What impression you feel now?
It's a great impression. It is first my meet with foreign people during 11 years. Sorry, my English, because I'm out of practice. I learn English only this in prison camp.
But we do understand your English.
I hope so.
People understand these things. I spent 5 years in a psychiatric establishment. I was 25 or 26 years old. I just finished my studies at the institute. The KGB terrorized me for 5 years without my having anything to reproach myself for, as far as my political convictions are concerned, simply because I'm anti-communist and anti-Soviet. Why am I? Well, I'll explain it to you in 2 words so as not to waste time. I am an anti-communist because the economic and political system of the Communist Party is not in conformity with human nature. Why am I anti-Soviet? It's humiliating for me to accept all of the crimes which have been committed during the 72 years that this regime has existed, the millions of innocent victims, as we now know with Glasnost, even if we have always known it. The state, the Soviet Union, have pursued me for 5 years without offering me the possibility of existing as a human being. I was not permitted to have a normal family, children. I have not been able to be a father or a brother or a husband. In fact, I've been deprived of my country, my fatherland, to the degree that personally I no longer have anything left to lose in life. Everything is lost already. I'm no longer a young man. I no longer consider myself to be a Soviet citizen. I've made a request to the American government for aid, sending it by the intermediary of a man who was liberated. I absolutely cannot imagine living in this country. Generally speaking, I'm ready for anything. Finally, I could even take off on a rubber raft to get out of here. I don't want to stay here as long as there are people I cannot respect. I don't see the possibility of living. There's talk about perestroika. They say that Gorbachev proclaims democratization, glasnost, that the trials have been revised. There's nothing of all that. In this camp, in this state, it's the KGB which continues to direct everything. You understand? The KGB and nothing else. There is nothing else. It continues to wield all its power. It hasn't been diminished. The grass has not been cut from under its feet. You understand? 2 weeks ago, the head of the camp said to me, Mikhailov, it was in the presence of everybody, Mikhailov, if you don't behave, we're going to send you to the madman. And that at the very moment when they adopted a law saying that psychiatry must not be used as a means of pressure or repression. But in fact, they keep practicing it without let-up. Actually, repression can be even worse than here. This is one thing, but solitary confinement is worse. It's over there. Can you open the other cell? You can open it, can't you? Open it. That doesn't come from here. We brought the mattresses from another cell. That one is the disciplinary cell, and that one's the schizo. I've been there and under still worse conditions. A cell smaller than this wide, this high, this long. I spent 31 days in this cell before they transferred me to the one opposite, to the disciplinary cell. That's how they hold political prisoners in the USSR. I try to say it in English.
Here in this house, I have 1 month with bed, with this, and 3 months with cold box, in very close box, you see.
It's a closed room.
Yes. Well, without bed, without walking, without press, without reading, not here in much worse health.
The iron bars close on Mikhailov, Goldovich, and Ketenchev. When will they be free? Will they have to wait for the year 2000 in this world of hopelessness? There are fewer and fewer prisoners left. Between now and the end of the year, a dozen more will be liberated. We're not expecting new arrivals, with the result that by next year there won't be anybody left.
It's not possible. Sorry.
Is it really the end of a fearful era? In the opinion of Colonel Orlov, General Director of Penal Colonies in the USSR, there's no doubt about it. I think that there's going to be an about-face. The train is on the track. The messages that the prisoners have been able to pass on freely during this exceptional day only make it even more urgent.
Ну, я бы хотел сказать, чтобы
I would like my wife to wait
жена
for
ждала
me.
меня, что я скоро буду дома.
I'll
Осталось 2
soon be
месяца.
home. I have 2 months left.
Много думаю о ней.
I think of her all the time. I'm bored. I love her. That's all.
Все.
Вот стрессовое состояние мешает.
I'm under stress.
Я благодарен президенту Бушу, мировой общественности, госпоже Тэтчер.
I thank President Bush, international public opinion, Mrs. Thatcher for the efforts they've made to procure my liberation.
Несмотря на то, что за каждый
Even though I've had to pay for each conversation Mr. Reagan or Mrs. Thatcher had with the Soviet leaders by torture.
Юрию Федоровичу Орлову,
I thank Yuri Fedorovich Orlov and Anatoly Borisyevich Sharansky and all those who fight for human rights in the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union represents the greatest threat in the world to human rights. I do not wish to be a criminal, and in this country I can't be anything except a criminal. In England, I'll be a free man. That is my only goal in the immediate future. I want to thank that woman in the United States for having sent me this Bible, which I am reading. It's a great source of support for us.
President
Mitterrand, France, England, Mrs. Thatcher, Reagan, Bush, the United States are the only hopes for civilization, the only hope of an authentic life for the world, for all human beings, the only hope for a normal life. A great thank you, and that is very little. I am ready for this world, this life, these men, for their morale, for their ethics, to give my life at any minute whatsoever.
Благодарен вам, что все сюда приехали. Большое вам спасибо. Это очень неожиданно.
All my thanks for your coming. It was so unexpected. As soon as we opened our eyes, we saw you.
Thanks.
1,000 thanks.
Большое всем спасибо.
All my thanks to you all.
Еще хотел сказать вот что.
I'd like to say this still. I heard it said that we were going to return to the Schizo after this. The show will be over, and we're going to find ourselves back in the Schizo. Once again, we're going to have our heads shaved, put our handcuffs back on, and everything will start all over again like before. A wise call to vigilance, so that political sentencing will not be disguised as a common law offense, so that Perm 35 is really the last Gulag. 5 prisoners liberated in August 1989.